Hello Warriors, this is Mars, and welcome back to another ESO PvP build video. Today I bring you a Magic of Dragonite PvP build for small scale and solo PvP for non-CP. The Nedic Sage. With devastating flame attacks, you'll incinerate everything that steps towards you in a maelstrom of fire and brimstone. Let's jump into the build. This build mainly focuses on dot pressure and burst, with the added bonus of switching from offense to defense really quickly. It also has the addition of having a purge, which I'll get to momentarily. This build is pretty solid, it has good damage, good burst. It's mainly focused on building up that burst, especially since using Molten Whip, which I'll get to the kind of burst rotation later on in the video. It's solid, but the build is still reliant heavily on mobility. You kind of want to constantly be moving, because in this meta, in this day and age, if you're standing still, you're going to get bursted very, very quickly, no matter if you have high defenses or a purge or whatever. I've taken out people easily with 40k plus health, even at max health, max health like 40 plus. It's a lot easier now since there's so much damage and there's so high penetration. The tank meta, in my opinion, kind of does not exist, except for maybe Magsorks and the occasional Warden, and obviously Stamcrow. Like, a lot of the classes that I named are going to give you a hard time still, but you'll be able to contend against them and pressure them just as well as they can pressure you. Also, in terms of damage, you have the option of running Malakath. It was brought up into one of my streams that I should be running Malakath because you shouldn't rely too heavily on crit, and the credible source that was telling me this, I appreciate you for telling me that, because it is honestly true. You don't in my opinion, you don't necessarily need Malakath for this build to have high damage, but Malakath is encouraged if you want to take out multiple people faster, especially if you plan to play this kind of build solo or even in a group. But Malakath offers just way more damage in terms of the crit. Now, I'm not saying you can't crit very often, which most of the time you really aren't, since the critical chance got reduced. You're critting enough, in my opinion. But if you want to have consistently high damage and you want to take people out faster, Malakath 100%. So that's a little bit of the minor description. Now let's jump into the stat sheet. So I switch zones so I could go over some stuff afterwards. So let's talk about the stat sheet. So here are my stats. This is front bar. This is back bar. So back bar is mainly your defensive bar. This is where you're going to turtle up when you need turtle up, but it's mainly switching from offense to defense really quickly. I know the magic recovery doesn't look super high, but that's what is unbuffed without a potion. You kind of are going to be kind of reliant on potions to help out with the sustain a bit. You'll have good sustain, but it's just like you're going to need a bit more of a push. I kind of had to build some things into it to make sure I have good sustain. So those are the stats. I could show the advanced stats realistically. As an Ord, since you have higher resistances, especially on Mag DK, you're going to get higher spell resistance. Your physical resistance ain't that impressive, but it's better than not having physical resistance at all, which is pretty much what it feels like this patch. I mean, if you stand still, if you make a mistake, if you don't block certain attacks, you're going to get bursted. That's guaranteed. Purge or no purge, you're going to get melted. So, like I said, I'm a Nord. High resistances, higher health, and a little extra stamina to CC break, which CC breaking really isn't an issue this patch, especially if you're in 4 to 5 light armor. You're kind of good. Now, for food, I'm running Beadwood Sugar Skulls. I kind of want to say that because this is literally my last one. I have to make some more. So this is pretty much the best food. You can run Clockwork Citrus Fillet or another dual or tri-stat food, whichever you feel is necessary. I feel like this is the best for my build. I like this. It's got a good health recovery, and I can build into max sustain on my own, and then extra stam. So, Gucci. I think on this build I have almost 20k max stamina in non-CP, so I'm kind of good. I'm running the Atronach for extra magic sustain, and that's it. That's it for the stat sheet. Now let's go over buff stats. A lot of your damage is backloaded, so just be mindful. It was 4,355. I think the maximum damage on this build is about 4,880. With the max magic up 35k. It's pretty good damage. I think the highest whip I crit on a pretty tanky target was about 9.2k, and non-crits for on average, well, when I'm not using Malakath, is around 7 or 8k, whereas a Malakath on average is going to be about 7 or 8k and sometimes 9k. So, well, Malakath has a pretty good balance. It kind of is pretty consistent. You're going to consistently do high damage in Malakath. that's a good trade-off. So let me see, buff stats, back bar, those are the resistances, and I am using blood spawn, so the spell resistance is going to scale up higher. And with sword and shield, so is the physical resistance. So let's go over consumables. So specifically, I use the tri-stat pots. Tri-stat pots are nice for that extra sustain. I mean, that gets you up to about 1800 max sustain front bar, 19, almost 2k back bar. So you have good magic sustain on top of the other poisons that I'm running. So you have good max sustain, you have good health recovery, and you have a lot of other good stats to help you supplement you so you don't fall over and you get bursted. You can heal through most things. I mean, you can take a lot of pressure, but realistically, those tri-stats come in handy. Like I said, immovables are really good. I would integrate immovables, but I just haven't made any of this yet. I kind of just focused on the basics. So let's talk about gear next. Now the Inferno Staff is option. You can go with any type of Inferno Staff if you're not using Malacath. Right now I wasn't using Malacath, but majority of the time when you are using Malacath, you want to run a Spinner's Inferno Staff. Spinner's Inferno Staff is kind of expensive. I think this one I paid like 80k for. This was the cheapest one that I found. I got lucky. I think the actual cheapest one is around 120k, and some of them are worth even more. So you kind of want to get lucky or spend AP for the actual spinner staff and the regional vendor in Cyrodiil. That would be the cheapest if you don't want to spend too much gold. So right now I'm just running an Inferno Willpower Staff since I'm not using Malacath. I mean, if you want to use a Vattershrine's Inferno Staff, go for it. If you want to use a Lightning Staff, Ice Staff, it's up to you. Whichever one you feel is prevalent. I like the Inferno Staff just because it increases the damage of fire attacks and direct damage attacks, so that directly buffs Whip, Molten Whip, so it's good damage. You want that. It's also Nerdhone with a spell damage enchant, so you want that. So this is a kind of under the radar set. Weird Tree. I've ran Weird Tree for a very, very, very long time on MagDK, like years ago. I just never said anything about it. So you get max recovery, spell damage, mag recovery, and then when you cast a magic ability, you remove all negative status effects from yourself. And now, when it says negative status effects, it means that also means proc set. So as far as scales, anything that can be cast upon you is going to be removed. The only exception is Vattershrine's Inferno Staff or the Vattershrine staffs in general, just because I think those are more focused on being abilities rather than just status effects, so those can't be purged. But you can purge practically everything in the game with this set. So yeah, that's your purge. MagDK is kind of always needed a purge or something to help out with like removing negative status effects. It's a really good set. On the shield bar, they got the prismatic enchant with a sturdy shield. It's really good. The more you can block, the better. You don't want to hold down block too much. I mean, just block when you need to block and avoid the hard hitting attacks and anticipate whatever comes your way. For poisons, I'm running Drain Poison, so I get a little extra healing and I get a bit more magic return. That's mainly what the focus is for that. I'm not really worried about increasing the cost of magic abilities for my opponents because, I mean, sustain is so easy to come by. You run a Blood Spawn, mainly for that increased stam recovery to help out with CC breaking and mobility, and then the actual spell resistance and the ultimate generation, which in turn helps out with sustain, since MagDK mainly relies on Earthen Heart passives to really give off more resources back. So this build mainly runs 5 Impin and 2 Sturdy, mainly for just mobility and blocking and reducing the amount of critical damage done to you. So those are really the best. So I'm running about 2 prismatic pieces, one on the shield and one on the chest. So that's Impin shield, Impin chest, light shoulder, blood spawn. We are also running, I said spinners earlier, so running spinners, sturdy spinners. So that extra pin really comes in handy for cutting through people. Like this, realistically, spinners does pretty much all the damage. If you're running spinners on most builds, you're going to be cutting through people very easily this patch. It's no-brainer. It's as long as you can maintain your combos, you can still finish people off very quickly. Spinners is a really good damage set, especially for this patch. We got other Impin spinners. We got Greaves of the Weird Tree and Impin, and we have Sturdy Boots of the Weird Tree and Sturdy, obviously. So yeah, all magic glyphs except for the chest plate. and we run it in prismatic. Now for the jewelry, I kind of played around with the jewelry quite a bit. I basically was looking for a good healthy medium in between sacrificing a little bit of damage and getting it later on. So Bloodthirsty, this is good because it gives you a lot of that damage that you're missing in the end. You're missing it because you kind of have to compensate for trying to get that recovery up. So we got the reduced cost of magic, reduced magic cost of spells by 203, and then we got additional mag recovery with the infused, so extra resources. And then there's the spell damage on the back end. Now, like I said before, you don't have to necessarily run Malakath. If you wish to run Malakath, but you're going to need that spinner staff, 100%, because you'll be missing that fifth piece. So the damage is like significantly higher if you run spinners. If you run the spinner staff of Malakath, it's just the fact that the damage is going to be consistent, and with the lack of resistances from your opponents and the fact that you're cutting through even more. Because I think this build has about like 12k spell pin, plus additional some odd physical pin. So everybody's going to be cutting through them relatively easily, especially if you do non-CP and BG content. So we're going to talk about skills next. I'm going to go through the back bar skills first, and I'm going to talk about the front bar skills, and then we're going to talk about flex box, and then maybe passives. So first and foremost, this is the just do it simply, bro. Just chill out. So let's talk about skills. We're going to go through the back bar and then front bar skills. We're going to talk about some of the flex spots, and then we're going to go over some of the important passives. Let's begin. So we have volatile armor, cauterize, coagulating blood, ransack, degeneration, spell wall. On the front bar, this is your offensive bar. You have inner light, engulfing flames, burning embers, fossilize, molten whip, ferocious leap. So going back to the back bar, you kind of want to maintain these two as much as possible. Coagulating blood, you can have it on, but don't try to maintain it too much. It is expensive. Just try to maintain as much as you can. Cauterize and volatile armor, as well as degen. These three abilities need to be maintained more than the others. Now, coagulating blood is a great skill, especially for healing. Like, you can heal quite often. You can crit quite often with this skill. It has a really good base healing skill, and this is one of the abilities that you're going to be using to activate your purge, since your purge is activated on your back bar. So coagulating blood is going to burst heal for quite a bit. I think the highest I've seen is probably about 17 or 18k off of a heal. It's a great heal. Use it. So ransack, this is going to be an additional form of penetration, as well as giving you minor protection. So it's going to mitigate some of the damage that is applied to you. But like I said before in previous videos, nothing is going to mitigate more damage than a wall-time block, a wall-time dodge roll, or just not being there and not being hit. You want to be extremely mobile this patch, because the amount of damage that can be done to you in an instant is enormous. So always be moving. But if you are in a situation where you need a reset button, spell wall is a very good reset button, especially when you're outnumbered. So you can move around and reflect any projectiles that are coming your way, and you'll be in a much better position to survive and then turn and burn. So yeah, spell wall is like one of the best. I mean, you could use Mac Michelle, or you could use something else. I mean, it's up to you. Spell wall is a good idea to use. So ransack, if you don't use ransack, you can run the Sigic skill, like race against time to channel acceleration and give you additional stand removal. Plus, it'll give you extra speed. They're great skills. There's also this skill to increase that block cost. Well, decrease that block cost and increase the amount you can mitigate when you block on this bar. So yeah, it's a great skill. Degen, you can run molten armaments, so it not only buffs you and the team, but you lose the damage over time effect. It's up to you whether you want to use it. It's just very situational. So front bar, if you don't want to run inner light, run weakness to elements, and it's morph, the one that gives you magicka back, obviously for the magicka sustain, and for when you're not using ransack back bar. Engulfing flames, you always want to maintain this because it increases the damage of all your fire attacks in conjunction with everything else. Well, in conjunction with all your other fire attacks, like the fire staff. The fire staff increases your damage done with fire attacks, increases damage done with direct damage attacks, and then engulfing flames increase the damage of all fire attacks by type. So we have next, you want to maintain this in conjunction with burning embers. Burning embers is going to be your primary one of your primary heal over times, and your damage applications. So make sure you use these in conjunction with one another, because this will buff this. You also have Fossilize. If you don't want to use Fossilize, you can use Chain. Chain is a good CC. It's just, it can be a challenge to use if you don't know how to use it properly. Me, myself, I'm not great with Chain. What I would recommend you watch if you want to get better with Chain is watch Zdan. He's a great Chain user, and I will leave a link to his channel in the description. But Fossilize is a good CC on its own. It's a good zoning CC for when people are running towards you, especially if you're in BGs. What I usually do is I just CC all who come in, who all are like charging towards me and my group, just to CC them and dismember their burst combo that's coming in. Because obviously, why would they run towards you if they're not ready to hit you in the face with a Dawnbreaker? So in conjunction with like the CC, Whip is really nice, especially when it's an empowered Whip. So basically, while slotted, whenever you activate a different Ardent Flame ability, you gain a stack of Seething Fury, which increases your damage of your next Molten Whip by 33%. On top of increasing your spell and weapon damage by 75 for 5 seconds, this effect can stack up to 3 times with no internal cooldown. So basically, just maintaining these two will increase your damage of your next Molten Whip and increase your weapon and spell damage. So since you don't have an execute, you usually build up towards increasing the whip, and then before you whip, you leap, and then you whip after. So you get high burst after the fact. So yeah, it's a good burst combo for when you need to finish people off. So next is the ultimate, which I kind of already said, Ferocious Leap, but you kind of have a few options. I want to say, me, I like my burst quick and efficient, so I'll go for Ferocious Leap. You can go with Take Flight, because Take Flight actually does more damage on this build nowadays. You can't really go wrong with either one. That's what I'm trying to say. Ferocious Leap is really good. It does a lot of damage, especially with Malacath and without Malacath. I think on average the highest leaps I usually get is around 6 or 7k, and with Malacath I think the highest is 10k. So you're going to have a lot of damage depending on the type of targets and their resistances, and if they block or not, and if they're fossilized or if they're CC'd. It's up to the situation. But like, yeah, Take Flight actually does a lot more damage from what I've noticed. So if you want to use Take Flight, use Take Flight. You just won't get the damage shield that scales off of your maximum health. And then there's Shifting Standard, which I don't really use. It costs so much. And then there's also the Fiery Comet, the Mage's Guild skill. I can't remember which one it is. It's one of the comments. One of the comments are also really good. If you're willing to work towards it, go for it. It works. Oh, Meteor. Meteor is what I meant. It's either Ice Comet or Shooting Star. So those are some of the basic skills. Let's go over some of the passives now. So besides talking about all the passives here and the actual class tree, realistically you want everything in the class tree. Everything is going to be a benefit not only to your survival and your damage, but your sustain, especially your Earth and Heart passives, since they're going to give you resources back every single time you cast an ultimate ability. So yeah, just make sure you use that. So Sword and Shield, obviously you want all the passives there just because they're going to increase your mobility while blocking, mainly just to protect you. This is mainly just to protect you from a whole bunch of bursts, especially for reducing the damage done to you while blocking. You want to block as much as you humanly possible, but you don't want to hold down block too much. And one of the most important offensive skill lines, you kind of want that Inferno Staff tuned up to the ass up, just because that's where all your damage is coming from, baby. Everything. Destro Staff realistically does most of the damage for you in conjunction with everything else. So yeah, it's probably one of the most powerful skill lines in the game, especially if you use a Destro Staff. So let's talk about light armor and heavy armor. For this build, I think I kind of skipped over it. I'm running 4 light, 3 heavy. I like this conjunction. It makes me a little bit more tankier, and I stay mobile, and I don't have to worry about the negative status effects too much because each one complements the other. They're not too bad. So, like, I mean, if you don't know about it, light armor gives you reduced damage taken from magical attacks, reduce the cost of roll dodge, and reduce movement speed penalty to sneak, blah, yada, yada, yada. Some of that shit's not too important. Mainly, it's the reduced cost of break free and everything at the top. I don't worry too much about sneak. I mean, there's some penalties, but it's not too big of a deal. I mean, increase the cost of block isn't too bad since I'm a DK and I have a shield and I'm also wearing heavy armor. I can kind of counteract some of the block costs. It's not too big of a deal. So realistically, you want as many passes if you can. Since I'm running 4 pieces, that's the resistance is this concentration. So I got 3.7k penetration on this build without spinners. It's pretty good. It's in conjunction, it's about, let's see how much character sheet, about 7.1k. It's pretty good. Plus with the added penetration, you got about 12k penetration. Or actually, I think it's about 13. Let me see. So it's 5,935. So yeah, you get about 13,000 penetration on this build. You have a lot of pen. So with heavy armor, you get the increased resistances, you get increased health recovery, on top of the Constitution passives, giving you magic back and stamina back every time you take damage, once every 4 seconds. So you get additional sustain. It just comes in different forms. You just kind of have to weave it in together. So max health, max magic, and max stamina from heavy attacks, so you get more resources back and rapid mending. This is kind of nice now since you can get this even on light armor builds. You don't have to wear 5 pieces heavy. Now, if you aren't a Nord, since Nord gets increased resistances and increased stamina, I mean, this build, I really just built around being a Nord. I mean, this build can technically work for anything. Let's say if you're a Dunmer, you're already going to get more max stamina, max magic than anybody else, plus the actual spell damage. You just have to build for more health. Same thing goes for something like a Breton. Breton has good resource sustain. Breton also has good max magicka, as well as having more spell resistance. But I think Breton will kind of fall a bit short in the resistance category, since it would only compensate when you're not purging, which isn't a bad thing. But at the same time, you'd want to run, I'd just say, like maybe an additional heavy piece to compensate for the lack of resistances. But it's up to you. If you can handle running two pieces heavy and like the rest light, then go for it. If you're going all damage, go for it. Just be mindful that you're gonna have to build for additional. You might have to build for some additional stam and some additional resistances, just to make sure you can survive in most scenarios. Just because you don't want to not CC break in some situations. Because if you can't CC break against like a stam DK and he's about to do his full burst combo on you, he's probably gonna kill you. That's just how it is. So, like some of the basic PvP skills, like the Combat Frenzy, just to get that extra ultimate when you kill people, because you're going to be killing people pretty quick on this build, Malakath or no Malakath. I mean, it's just some of the basic stuff. Now, the Mage's Guild skill, I like the passives just because they reduce the cost. I mainly like Inner Light just to get those pesky Night Blades out of stealth. This build was mainly designed to really counteract against Night Blades, really to pull them out of stealth constantly, especially when they try to evade you. This is really to counteract Templars, Night Blades, and any other magic classes or stam classes that have a lot of dots or dot focused builds. This is kind of a counter to that. Now you can, what this works with Weird Tree, it delays their burst, so you have the opportunity to really counter them a lot easier. Now the Purge 100% helps, but if you're not mobile, like I've said this many times in the past, you have to be mobile. You have to be able to switch from offense to defense very quickly, and you have to have battle hardened awareness. Because if you're not really aware of the situations around you or aware of what your opponent's going to do next, they're going to burst you really quickly, and that's even double now just since the amount of burst that's out this patch. Now, am I really tanky for light armor? Yes, I'm really tanky for light armor. I can take a lot of damage, especially from 2 or 3 people beaming me at once. Now, the biggest trouble is probably going to be against Mag Source, just because Mag Source are going to do an enormous amount of damage to you, especially if they know what they're doing. Like, most Mag Source are kind of average. Some of them are really good, and there's that tier above that. Like, if you really fight against Mag Source against this build, you're not going to have a huge amount of success, just like any other build. I mean, you can do a lot of damage to them, but as long as they maintain those shields, it's a losing battle. I'm telling you straight up, it's a losing battle. This build can do a lot. It can delay their burst by quite a bit, and you can keep fighting and pressuring them, but understand that you're not going to be able to kill certain Mag Sorks 1v1. It's just not going to happen. Okay, I think that's about it. And I guess obviously the alchemy skill, you want medicinal use, and that's about it for those skills. Like I said before, you also want the Sigil skill line if you don't want to run Ransack. And I think that's about it. Next, I'm going to go through a bit of the healing and burst rotation real quick. So first things first, I'm going to talk a little about the defense, because realistically, that's kind of what I've been preaching this whole time, especially with Mag DK. If you don't understand how to heal through damage, and you don't have good defense on Mag DK, you are going to struggle. I promise you are going to struggle. Because offense is so secondary. Let's say that because, I mean, you have so much damage, and once you learn the offensive combos, it doesn't take a whole lot to cut people down. I mean, people will try to restrain you a bit, but since you have a purge and since you have since you have good healing, if you learn how to do those first, offense is secondary. You won't have to think about it because it'll already be innately there. So let's go through some of the the defensive rotation. So for the basis, you start out with volatile armor, then degen, then cauterize, then burning embers. This is mainly what you're going to maintain to make sure you heal through everything. If all those things are active, you're going to be healing just about anything. If you get bursted real quick, you can bar swap from your offensive bar back to your defensive bar, hit that shield bar, move around, make it hard to be hit cauterize, hit coagulating blood at the same time, and depending on how much health you're missing, coagulating blood is probably going to crit, well, not even crit heal, because you'll get, I think, most of the time a non-crit heal for about 15k whenever I'm like at 30% health and non-CP. So you're going to be hitting high numbers, and when you actually do crit, you're going to heal all the way, especially since you have a purge. Since the purge is pretty much going to be doing a good portion of your healing, it's going to remove everything from you except the Vat of Strand Staff, or yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the only thing I've noticed that it can't purge. So whenever you go on defense, just block at the right moments, make sure you're healed up, and then immediately go back to offense and do damage, because you don't want to be on defense for too long. It's instinctive. When you take too much damage, heal up and then move back to offense. So let's go through the offensive rotation. So that penetration always comes first. Engulfing Flames. So realistically, you're light attacking and maintaining these attacks, and then making yourself hard to hit. So let's go a little bit more in depth. Some resources back. So when you're setting up for offense, let's say if you're CCing them, let's say I hit Fossilize, you can't Fossilize these guys. So as soon as you hit Fossilize, you go behind them and start setting up your burst rotation. You never really stand in one place. You always move around. You make it hard for yourself to be hit. And you always focus on getting behind your target. The more you're behind your target, the better, because it's harder for them to set up their burst and you're already setting up yours. Now let's say you have the effect standing up and you have your leap. So everything's up, hit your leap, and you hit your whip after. You always hit your whip after, because that empowered whip is really what's going to help you execute people at the end. You never want to hit your whip first, which I still make that mistake to this day. You never want to hit your whip first, because you'll lose damage on your leap. You want your leap to do as much damage as humanly possible, because once you got that additional damage with that, plus with the Bloodthirsty, I think your damage really scales up to about 4.8k spell damage, plus the Malacath if you're using Malacath. So yeah, your leaps are going to hurt. Your leaps is going to be part of your burst combo, especially for when you're taking people out. Yeah.
Okay, here's a bit more of a deeper explanation, just showing off some gameplay. I mean, if you want to watch some more unedited gameplay, there's 2 streams that I have, and then if you want to watch some more edited gameplay, there's the actual video that I have in the description. So I'm fighting a Nightblade, a Stamplar, and eventually going to be a Warden, and then Stam DK. So realistically, the strongest fighter on their team was the Magblade. The Magblade, he had good resistances, he maintained all his buffs. So like whenever you fight a magic class with shields, you're going to have to work a bit harder. Realistically, like I said before, never stand in one place, always be mobile, choose who you want to focus, and make sure you maintain your major buffs, because if you drop health in your major buffs at any time, you're going to get bursted. If you're standing still, you're going to get bursted. So make sure you maintain your heavy attacks and light attacks. You pick and choose who you really want to take out first. I think I took out I guess it was a Mag Warden. I think he was an Orc. I don't know where he was a Stam or Mag Warden. He had a staff, so I guess he's a hybrid or something. I don't know. Took him out because he was the easiest target. Now the Magblade, he's playing defensive. The main thing is I want to talk a little about this. If you fight somebody who's very defensive and they're maintaining their major buffs, try not to CC them immediately. Let them believe they can be offensive. Because if you let them kind of do what they want, they'll make a mistake like he's about to make. He notices his health fell off, it's too late, leaped on him for 10k, then moved on to the Stam DK. Just finish him off that way. So here's another quick instance, just talking about how to delay your burst a bit in case you fight against someone who's very defensive. So I ran into this Argonian DK with like every single proc set in the game.
He was playing hella defensive, and it started to annoy me because last time he killed me because his Nightblade friend came out of cloak and killed me, and helped finish me off. So really, whenever you're in this situation, just back off, and they're gonna get overly aggressive, and they're gonna want to come finish you off. So the main thing is just follow up your burst. Make sure you're just setting them up. Don't CC them. Don't CC them immediately. Let them believe they can go offensive. When they notice they can't, CC them and take them down. Next, we're going to talk about about how to use your mobility against classes like Magplars and specifically Nightblades. So, like, here's a little clip with me and Dazed IRL. He's a really good all-around player. I don't think he has a channel, but he definitely plays just about every class. So he's playing Nightblade right now, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Nightblade. So when you're fighting against Nightblades, you always want to have movements going towards and front them. You never really want them to ever take your back. Dazed is a pretty solid Nightblade, so he's going to try and lead me on. I'm not having any of it. And then we have another fight after this one. So when you fight talented Nightblades like that, they're going to try and lead you on, especially through corridors. My best advice is never to follow a Nightblade when he's trying to pull backwards. If he tries to get behind you, just turn around and simply see what he's trying to do. See, he constantly tries to take my back. He's trying to lure me in, set me up for his burst combo. Do not walk into the burst combo. You will die very quickly. Now, you'll be able to purge some of the damage over time effects. See, he goes through a corridor. He's trying to set me up. I don't do it. You never play into the hands of the Nightblade. He will kill you very quickly. Now, just because he has burst doesn't mean I can't purge some of the damage over time effects. Like I said before, you always want to set up and defend yourself. Always go on offense to defense and then back to offense as soon as possible. See, he's trying to lead me down position so he could go, so he could CC me. So when you kind of evade that, you can kind of keep the fight going longer and prepare for your burst combo and set them up to take them out. So this last bit I want to talk about knowing what you're capable of and knowing how much damage you can take. Like I said before, this build can take a pretty hardy amount of damage, especially in outnumbered situations. Just don't overestimate your ability. Like I said, this build is heavily reliant on mobility for survival. Mobility, war-time blocking, battle hardened awareness. So, like, just if you're constantly moving, it's going to be hard for people to really take you out. So you kind of have to understand when to engage and when not to, how to evade, when to CC, when to burst, and when not to burst, and try and target efficiently. So this is just to show you a little bit of that and how well to survive. And also, don't be afraid to engage multiple people at once, but be mindful when to engage and when not to. Don't try and go towards 4 people at once. Don't stand there while they're coming downhill on you because they're going to burst you. If you constantly move, you're going to know how to like really beat those kind of people. That's pretty much it. That's all this was. Just you'll have some failures, but you'll have some successes as well. Just take what you can. Take the good with the bad. So if you made it this far, I would like to say thank you. Oh my god, I dropped my controller. I'd like to say thank you. Appreciate you for stopping on through, listen to my rambling. If you like the build, leave a like in the comment section. I will be posting more builds soon in the future. But for now, I'll probably be streaming this build most likely on Wednesday and Friday. Just since I'm enjoying playing MagDK right now and I don't really want to play anything else. If I do play something else, I will post something in the community chat. If you wish to become a part of the Legion of Warriors, please sub to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, especially if you'd come watch me every once in a while. Hit me up. Other than that, I would like to say thanks again for watching, and keep on slaying.